Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro. Today we're going to review Midsommar. This is the latest movie from Ari Aster, who is the director of Hereditary. It was obvious from Hereditary that you have to watch this director's next movie because he directed the shit out of that movie. Ended up on both our top 10s that year. Hereditary is about young woman.
Nope.
Midsommar is about her young woman played by Florence Pugh, who goes on a retreat in Sweden with a pagan cult with her boyfriend and her boyfriend's friends. She is not exactly appreciated by her boyfriend or boyfriend's friends, so it makes for kind of an awkward trip. What happens when a group of teenagers goes into a cult? You can fill in the blank for that. We've been hearing a lot of hype around this movie. I certainly was very hyped about it. There are parts of this movie that I think are iconic and sensational just by how messed up or violent parts of this movie are. If anything, this movie is a testament to Ari Aster having a fucked up imagination. The entire movie almost is like a dark comedy because of how absurd the journey is that you're going through. This movie is almost worth going to just for fun. I mean, you don't even have to be a movie fan. You go to see this movie just for fun and to laugh and have a riot, but also just be disturbed, then this is sort of a movie for you. The audience was absolutely hooting and howling.
Oh my goodness.
It's a funny ass movie, surprisingly so.
More so than an
in
Adam
a really
Sandler film.
interesting way. If this movie took itself seriously and it's about a cult, it would fall on its face probably. But the movie is so aware of how silly the cult can be. At the same time, it doesn't detract from the creepy nature of the cult. But you laugh at it a lot, and there's great comic relief from Will Poulter, especially. His character gets a lot of laughs.
There is so much cringe humor in this movie.
It's definitely unsettling, and it's weird, and it has horror elements, but it's not really a scary movie, even less so than Hereditary was. It didn't really bother me because the movie still has pleasures to be found.
If you're looking to be disturbed after Hereditary disturbed you, you will also be disturbed by some points in this movie. I found the trip scene to be really unsettling. I found the whole premise in the first act to be extremely unsettling. Just watching the characters go into this uncomfortable situation. The violence is stunning, and horror fans are not going to be disappointed. I mean, there is essentially no cutting away from all of the gore that you could possibly show.
It's the kind of movie that if you're in a sizable theater, it creates an audible reaction. It fills the theater.
It was like that moment in Drive when Ryan Gosling or somebody gets shot in the head, with a shotgun, and it's the first act of violence in the movie, and the head explodes. There's a lot of moments like that where you're like, oh my god, what kind of movie did I walk into? What am I witnessing? This grotesqueness. However, the audience simultaneously seemed to really enjoy it. They were really into it. I mean, and it wasn't like they were laughing at it. The movie lets you laugh with it also be disturbed at the same time. So the movie as a genre and tonal pleasure is fantastic. You're gonna get disturbed. You're gonna hoot and howl. What about from a technical perspective, Cole? I mean, this movie was stunningly shot. The blocking in every scene was fantastic. I mean, Ari Aster, he's forever gonna be a director to look out for. I think there were some improvements in that way with the way that the scenes were shaped from a visual standpoint than maybe even Hereditary.
He's just a masterful fucking director. There's no way around it. Hereditary was masterfully done, and this was equally masterfully done from a technical standpoint. I love the way that he uses these uncomfortable silences. I love the way that if he wants you to be shocked by something, he's not going to just put the camera in front of it and expect you to stare at it. He's going to switch to a wide, and then you're going to be looking around and you're going to be like, that thing over there is weird, and nobody's saying anything about it, and that's why it's effective.
And the cuts are extremely spare throughout. It only really feels like he's cutting when the scene is changing or when there's something heightened happening. This movie has a lot of long takes, just countless.
Especially in the beginning. They were really well done.
Really well done.
Again, the blocking is essential to those moments. The acting was also just fantastic in this movie, and you get a sense that the characters really mean something to the filmmaker, and they're not just acting out plot points or whatever. This isn't just a
boyfriend-girlfriend conventional thing. I mean, in the beginning, there's a lot of subtlety revealed about the relationship
writing was
between
really
the two.
great
The
in the
writing was
beginning.
excellent. You can tell that he's just such a writer. Florence Pugh and Jack Rayner are the ones that get the most development. They're both excellent in the movie.
Jack Rayner more like well cast, but like Florence Pugh is the one who's really showing her stuff. Like this is, you know, almost like a Toni Collette in Hereditary performance where it's so reliant on her being like in the moment, terrified, going through like 10 different emotions, and the camera will just hold on her face in like a close up on her face for, you know, minutes, and she's just absolutely like in it the whole time. So what a performer to look out for. You know, hopefully she's gonna be on one of our lists one day for an Oscar movie.
I also want to mention that the production design and the cinematography are immaculate in this movie. I mean, the production design is so creative and strange. Any wide shot just looks amazing, and thank God that they don't cut away from them. They let them hold on these amazing looking shots. I also want to give a shout out to the score, which is done by Bobby Kurlick, aka the Haxon Cloak. Ari Aster's scores from this and Hereditary are used very sparingly. They kind of embody like this otherworldly presence looming over the movie. And what I love about this score is that it's always playing against the darker tones in the movie.
You know, I guess, Cole, it's time to say, like, you know, did I find this movie to be, like, fulfilling on a thematic level? The first act of it, the whole premise, the whole setup, extremely engaged. Like, I love that part. I think the writing was amazing. The movie, overall, though, kind of, like, took a slight, like, downward dip. I never wasn't enjoying myself, but after a while, I felt like that, you know, initial premise with like the breakup and that plot that I was so invested in kind of got like put to the side for, you know, what is always like supposed to happen in these movies. And I thought the transformation for the character was more like, oh, interesting. It's interesting that this person came to this place by the end of the movie, but I didn't find it to be something like that I would necessarily connect with. You look at it and you said, oh, that's messed up. That makes sense for this character. It's sort of messed up, but like you can see how they arrived there. So I like that part of the movie, but I also felt like if you had a movie that really stuck to that like cringy breakup premise as Ari Aster's been pitching his movie, then I think you could have had something like more dramatically fulfilling happening between these characters, and I don't think you like get there with this dynamic. You know, some of the movie, I have to say, like, at its worst, felt like vapid or meaningless or didn't do anything, didn't seem to be motivated by a certain purpose. I don't think there's like a statement in this movie that the director is trying to say something in this movie. I don't think that's there.
I would disagree with you a little bit. I mean, here's where I agree, is that the movie starts out really strong and it doesn't explore the relationships in the way that it did in the beginning. And there is overall an arc in the movie, but at 2 hours and 20 minutes, the middle sometimes feels like that arc is moving very slowly and sometimes you don't know where it's going. I think that there may be somewhat of a statement.
If there is a statement, it's not something that like the director believes.
Well, I think it is what he believes. I think that there's a lot in this movie, and thinking about it more, there are strong thematic threads in this movie. Did they like eat at my soul? Not really, but I still think that there is some meat to the story. And I think if you watched it again, or if I watched it again, there might be things that we pick up on.
I just still don't think there is meat.
Well, I could get into an analysis if you want.
Oh, well, let's get into an analysis. And there's going to be spoilers ahead. So we're going to give our ratings right now, and then we're going to do an analysis. And if you haven't seen the movie, go fucking see the movie. What are you doing? Why haven't you seen the movie yet? What's wrong with you? Overall, like, I was both somewhat let down and also extremely satisfied by this movie. I'm going to go with an 8. Pretty light 8, though.
Oh, I'm going to give this movie like a light 9 out of 10. Which feels wrong, because I gave Hereditary a 9, but...
Yeah,
I think that Hereditary is like better, so it's weird.
Hereditary is a stronger movie for me and left more of an impact.
The only thing that bothered me about Hereditary was the ending. I actually like the ending of this one quite a bit, and I think we can get into the analysis now because this is like where
we're just dancing around it.
I mean, obviously on the surface level, Florence Pugh is finding a family in this cult where she has lost one in the beginning, and in addition to finding a family, she is ridding herself of a boyfriend who she's holding on to because he's really the only thing that she has, and she feels like she needs to like grab onto that. But by the end of the movie, because she is empowered by this embrace of family, she's able to let that go and let it die, as we can all tell from the beginning that this relationship needed to die. I think that looking at the relationship as a death makes sense because there's so much in this movie that is about life and death, or the cycle of dying. It's really shown through the contrast of cultures, whereas when we start out the movie, which I think is really important, it starts out in winter, then it becomes summer. They have a seasonal change. It looks very dark most of the time. It's mostly night. The interactions that people have in America are very impersonal. We start out having disconnects over the phone, and then the grieving process is like a very isolated, kind of lonely thing, whereas when we get to the Midsommar Festival, it's always daylight. There's no such thing as nighttime. They look at death as a natural part of life. It's part of the cycle. Grieving is a communal act. There's one really important scene in the movie where Florence Pugh is crying and heaving, and a bunch of women from the tribe get around her and they start doing it with her, which is this cathartic release for the character because she's not in this alone. She's experiencing it with a lot of others, and the community is making it easy for the negative emotions to just flow through. And it's also the way that they react at the very end when everything's burning, is that they're all just like screaming and letting out their emotions, which is very unlike we do in the US. The idea that loss is this permanent thing and that she's now just empty. When she gets to Midsommarfest, after she sees the elders jump off the fucking cliff and smash their goddamn faces on the rock, and it's disgusting, she sees her family in that, and that starts her on a path because of the way that they accept that as being part of life, even though it's so brutal and so violent. That's part of life for them.
The grotesqueness is like a part of this understanding, like, oh, I'm seeing like the human body in a different way. I'm seeing the human form in a different way. And like I think that was the point of her imagining like the stream where like they're cutting in her actual parents with like these people who jumped off the cliff who are also like elderly. That's part of her journey in starting to understand in starting to acquire a different viewpoint, which is not necessarily good or bad, but for her, it's anything to like relieve her of that stress is going to be helpful for her. I would agree with you on like the whole analysis part, but the part that bothers me is that I don't feel like this movie is like a deep masterpiece just because it has these themes. Like, of course, a group of Americans coming into the pagan culture, like that is a culture clash. This movie just does a better job at exploring like the differences between those. This isn't Ari Aster working out the better viewpoint between these cultures is, or what like the medium is between them, or why one is like better than the other. This is not that at all. There's no statement to be made there. It is just like a part of the movie that is given a good amount of attention, but there's like not something you draw away from that, and so it doesn't feel like these are being explored in like sincere ways. It just almost feels like as a part of the movie, these pagans don't look at death the same way. They have a different view of family. This person who is desperate for family can find that in the cult and adopt their different views on death so that she has like a second chance at life. I think there's like more of a disturbing element to that than there is like a happy
but that's
part.
That's what I think is interesting.
No, I agree that it's interesting.
Is it disturbing or is it
no?
Like
I think
celebratory.
I think it's more disturbing because it's sort of saying that she has nothing else, and so like a person in this situation almost has nowhere else to turn except for like any kind of like extreme or weird idea. They're so susceptible to fall into that because like everything is truly like gone for them. They have like no sense of family, so they will like go for whatever is around them, whatever can like satiate them. I don't think like any of these are like statements on like human nature or statements on anything. Like they're interesting parts of the movie, they're well thought out, but like again, I don't think there's like a takeaway to the movie. It didn't feel like she really confronted like this relationship dilemma that was built with this guy. The statement of the ending doesn't feel like it's coming from him. It just feels like an ending to a story. Just an ending.
I don't know if it feels like an ending. I mean, I definitely can agree. It's hard to like apply a message to the movie. I do think that in a lot of ways it is a strength of the movie that it is conflicting and it's not giving you a message.
I agree with that.
And it's giving you ideas to kind of grapple with, like the morality of in a lot of ways. You come to see like a lot of positive ways of this culture, but at the same time They're incredibly violent. It feels torn, but I think it's still an interesting movie to grapple with. And also for that reason, I think it might be better in a rewatch, and I think that it has grown on me a little bit. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
If you went to Midsommar Fest, how would you die?